All right. Well, I'm excited here to be with you for another episode of our Breakthrough Autism podcast. Today we have Jason Riley, father of Austin Riley, who's with Racing with Autism. My name is Nancy Marchese. I'm a board certified doctoral level behavior analyst and a clinical psychologist. My goal is to help 2 million children with autism and their families by transforming their lives, and I can't wait to help you too. Jason, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So thrilled to have you here. Well, I'd love to take our viewers through the journey that is what it is today, which is essentially that you have a son, Austin, who races across the world. Amazing. As far as we know, he may be the first Canadian racer with autism, let alone first North American race car driver with autism, let alone the first person in the world who's racing with autism. Now today, there are thousands of people who've been inspired to race with autism because of Austin's story, your family's story. This is incredible. But let's start at the beginning. How did this all start? Where did this, journey begin, starting with diagnosis for Austin, and we'll go from there.
When Austin started racing, it was really just my wife and myself trying to find him something that he wanted to do or enjoyed doing. Austin's early years in our home was such a pleasure to have him around. There was laughter nonstop. The way he saw life was just different than everybody else, and I caught myself so many times when he would say something, I never would have looked at it that way. Like, he always had such a unique perspective on everything. And it was only when Austin started school that we realize that, we thought Austin was going to go to school and do all these great things, and people would love him just like we loved him, because it was just nonstop laughter in our house when he was around. And we thought that would translate into school. Like, how could somebody not like this kid? And, it didn't, the first day of school, take for instance, Austin went to school with a knapsack that was filled from top to bottom with Matchbox cars or Hot Wheels cars. And there's like hundreds of them. And I said, Austin, why are you taking so many cars to school? And he said, well, Dad, if I give one to each kid, they'll be my friend. And what do you say to that, right? Off you go, son. Have fun.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. That's incredible.
But it wasn't long after that we started to realize that Austin really had trouble fitting in. All he wanted to talk about was cars. And when you're 8, 9 years old, there's not many kids that have the same interest as that, and Austin really wasn't interested in talking about anything else other than cars. So he wasn't watching any TV shows all the other kids watched. Everything was centered around cars, and he started to struggle in school, started to get picked on and bullied, and through grades 1, 2, it was a really hard thing to see. This kid that we thought was going to do so amazing in school and may have so many friends wasn't getting invited to birthday parties because he was different. It was a really hard thing to watch as a parent, and for my wife and myself, we couldn't make sense of it. Why in our house it was such a pleasure to be around, but in school nobody else would see it that way. And watching him get bullied and picked on, and every day you come home from work and you open his agenda, there'd be a massive note, this happened today, and then thinking back, the way that my wife and I treated Austin throughout this whole experience made things even worse, because he's having a really hard time at school fitting in, and he's getting bullied and picked on day after day. And then when he gets home, from the time Dad gets home from work, then he gets to listen to me lecture him about what a crap job he's doing at school every day, it really wasn't a very fun time for him. And we decided that we had to find him some activities to get him out of his room, something other than playing video games or something like that. Something he can go out and experience the world, because the only safety he felt in this world was in his room. And we tried. I'm from England, so the first thing we signed him up for was soccer. It was one of my loves, and the first time Austin was on the field, I remember him standing in front of the other team's net, and the ball landed like right at his feet, and he kicked at it and scored. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. We found something. And, he came running over to me on the sideline for what I thought was going to be like the most amazing father-son moment. Like, I'm so proud of you. And he stopped about 3 feet from me and like with a straight face said, can we go home now? And he was so happy that he scored because he thought that was the goal he was supposed to be there to accomplish. And then after that, we don't have to do this anymore. It looked like somebody shot his dog when I told him, this was the first of like 17 soccer games they had to play. And that time he scored was the only time he touched the ball, really, the whole year. So then fall came and we, signed him up for power skating, thinking maybe hockey's better for him. Maybe it's quicker. Maybe he'd enjoy it. And, he really enjoyed the process of getting new skates and a helmet. And we went to the first class and he stepped on the ice and almost immediately fell down. And then the instructor came over to him to help him up. And he basically said, why should I get up? Because I'll just fall down anyway. You go on about your business and I'll sit right here and let me know when you're done. And he sat on the ice, for 55 minutes waiting for the class to end, and then crawled off the ice, and that was the end of his hockey career. And then after New Year's, very early spring or late winter, we received a flyer in the mail about a go-kart program at our track near our house. And I thought maybe, this would be a good thing for Austin. Austin's first words weren't mom or dad, it was Ferrari. Ferrari. So
Love
it
it.
kind of set the stage for Austin's obsession in life, which from that moment on was cars, whether it was die-cast cars or playing racing video games, or we bought him like a Power Wheels Jeep to drive up and down the sidewalk. And from the moment he got home from school, he would get his butt into that thing and he would drive it until it was bedtime. And we always had to have like extra batteries fully charged, because if the thing died, it would be the end of the world.
Not a good scene, yep.
We'd have to order extra wheels for it because it would run nonstop for 5 hours a night and the wheels would wear out. So we always had to have extra wheels just in case. I thought maybe this obsession for vehicles might translate into a love for driving a go-kart. And I remember coming home from work and looking at the flyer, and like the little light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, this might work for Austin. So I go up to his room, I open the door, and I'm like, dude, what do you think about this? And I put the flyer in front of him. And he kind of peered at it like this and then looked at me and goes, Dad, why would I want to do that? I suck at everything. If I go there, I won't be any good. People will make fun of me. I'll get upset and then I'll have to come home. So why don't we just skip all those steps? I'll stay in my room where I'm happy, and thanks but no thanks. And he gently pushed me out the room and closed the door in my face. So it took me about 4 weeks every day coming home from work. Come on, Austin, give it a go. Give it a go. And we're about 4 weeks in. Every day I come home from work and I start coming up the stairs, and he's standing at the top of the stairs and he's waiting for me. He's like, stop. I know what you're going to say. Just stop asking me the question. I'll make you a deal. We'll go to the track. I'll do 1 lap just to make you happy, just to get it over with. and then we'll come home. So I took that deal. It's not often Austin would change his mind on something.
Yeah.
So, a week later we went to the track, and he didn't want to listen to anybody or be told any information. He just wanted to get in the cart, do his lap, and get it over with. But the amazing thing is, when he got out there on the track with his group of 8-year-olds, he didn't come off after the first lap. And in fact, he didn't come off when they waved the checkered flag and everybody else came off. And I remember, standing on the fence, and Austin's still doing laps of the track, and the marshals are trying to stop him, and he's swerving on the grass around them, just like not a care in the world. And all I can hear is like the other parents on the fence saying, like, what's wrong with that kid? Why doesn't he listen? And they're all looking around trying to figure out who's the parent. And I remember at that moment, I'm like, oh God, no, not again. And I had to do the walk of shame out onto the track. And the walk was only 20 meters, but it was probably the longest walk of my life. I remember it forever. And I remember in those 20 meters how angry I got just because Austin was doing something he shouldn't be doing. And after all those notes, years of notes in the agenda, I was pretty much at my breaking point. My wife and I differed greatly on what Austin needed. Was, did he need more support? Did he need more punishment? Did he need more discipline? And we couldn't agree on anything, so his behavior was causing a lot of turmoil in my house between my wife and myself and ourselves and Austin. It just wasn't a happy place anymore. And I remember getting to the spot in the straightaway, and I remember how angry I was. And I had made a decision at that moment that when Austin came around, I was going to stop him, and I was going to embarrass him in front of all these people just like he embarrassed me. I was going to rip him like he had never been ripped before. And Austin thankfully knew where the brake pedal was and stopped about 5 feet from me. But even though he had a helmet on, I could see the biggest smile inside of his face. And I went from being the most angry I've ever been in my life to tears running down my face. And it was that moment that we had found something for Austin that he enjoyed doing. And when we got him out of the cart and talked about the experience, all he wanted to do was, when am I getting back in? Am I racing this afternoon? We went from not wanting to be there at all to like, I'm all in. Mm-hmm. And from that moment on, it's been just staggering.
Amazing. So much for one lap.
Yeah, so much for one lap.
So this story is remarkable. The journey just to this point. We'll talk about the next steps, but part of the reason why we wanted to share these stories through our podcast was for people to, hear the families' journeys, individuals with autism's journeys, and albeit they're all so different and it's such a wide spectrum, this notion of finding whatever interest, love, passion that each individual, just like any of us, really have, and using there are steps along the journey that may be challenging, or you diverge from the path, you try different things, but you keep trying, exposing your children to different opportunities and different activities because you don't know. And this flyer being this blessing that showed up, and you, Jason, being, astute enough to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to try this too. I think that really gives hope to a lot of parents and families and individuals to know that whatever that looks like for them, right, it can be so different for you. Maybe for some, it may be racing, and others it may be, I don't know, I worked with an individual who loved making pizza, and he's off now working at a pizza joint, But whatever that is, that there is a tribe that exists for all of us, and it's about finding that tribe. Correct. So here you have this flyer, and you go from okay, Dad, fine, and good for Austin for negotiating smart guy, to say, okay, I'll do one lap and that's it, to like, I don't want to get off this this racetrack is remarkable. And good for you for keeping at it. So now you're at this stage. What happens next?
Well, that afternoon, Austin wanted to race. We were only planning on doing like one session, and now we're racing that afternoon. And Austin, I think he finished like second last out of like a group of 10 or 12 kids. And, you know, it was on the way home, all he wanted to talk about is when are we going back? When are we going back? So, you know, our next race was like 2 weeks from then. So 2 weeks later, we went back, and Austin didn't finish second last. He finished third, and then he finished third again, and then second. Then he won a race. Then he won a race, and by the end of it, I think he finished like third overall, and we're staggered. And because of his performance, the karting facility provided with his scholarship for Austin to race his own go-kart. The following year, both of my wife and I were very naive in what the cost would be to get him racing. So we ended up buying him in his own go-kart, and he raced that competitively that following year. And for me to be his mechanic, somebody who wasn't mechanically inclined, didn't know anything about racing, it turned out I was the part that was holding him back that year. And I think he finished 8th overall out of 20 in his first year of competitive kart racing. And he was driving a 4-stroke go-kart, so a go-kart that sounds like a lawnmower, for an easy description. And at the end of that year, the karting facility said, Jay, why didn't you put Austin in a 2-stroke go-kart? I'm like, well, I don't understand what the difference is. Like, what's a 2-stroke go-kart? And it's like, well, it's a much faster machine. I'm like, much faster? Like, the kid's 9 years old and he's driving, 60, 70 kilometers an hour.
It's wild.
How much faster? And he's like, oh, about 100 kilometers an hour. Right. So I got a kid that can't tie his shoes, can't do up a zipper. I still have to brush his teeth, and you want to put him in a go-kart that does 100 kilometers an hour. You're crazy. He's either going to kill himself or kill somebody else.
Yeah.
Not a chance. Austin's standing beside me, listening to the conversation, and he's like yanking on my sleeve, like, Dad, I want to do this. I want to drive one of those. Let me drive one of those. Dude, are you crazy? There's no way you're getting in that. And, I got Austin in the car to drive home, and I started thinking to myself, this is like the first time in Austin's whole life where he's wanted to try a new challenge without being bribed or coerced or threatened. This is something he's wanted to do. So I kind of reassessed the way I was thinking. Maybe, in the right environment, in a safe environment, we should try him and just, allow him to do it. So we went back the next week, and I remember Austin being so excited to drive the 2-stroke go-kart that, he was getting his race suit on in the car on the way there. I remember putting the car in park, and I looked back, he was already gone. He was sitting in the thing already. They had it waiting on the grid for him. And they fired him up, and out he went, and didn't have like any moment of any lap, of any turn where he did not look comfortable. In fact, he looked more relaxed at a higher rate of speed than he did going slower. And it took me a long time to understand how that is possible. It's just the way Austin is wired. Sitting in this chair in front of you or me, Austin would look very anxious and nervous because life is not moving at the same speed his brain works. The amount of information that his brain craves, the only thing that gives that to him at a high rate of speed is racing. So a lot of other racers are racing at as the speed increases, as the jeopardy increases, they become more anxious and more nervous. And Austin is the exact opposite. The faster pace of the vehicle he's driving, the more comfortable he becomes, the more normal it is for him. And watching him in that two-stroke go-kart, and we eventually had to buy a two-stroke for him, and then he didn't want to drive the four-stroke at all because it was boring. It was hard work for him to drive it because he had to force himself to pay attention because the speed things were coming at him, the way he was processing information, it was not hard. It was not a hard thing to drive. And the two-stroke was more in sync with the wiring of his sensory system. And that first year racing the two-stroke, even with me as a mechanic that didn't know anything, basically all I did with a go-kart was put fuel in it and set a tire pressure. And he did everything else. Never changed setup, never did anything. Everybody looked like all of a sudden Jay had become a master mechanic. It was all him. And that first year, he pretty much won every race he entered, and usually by a large margin. And if the track was wet or it was very cold or slippery, Austin would be on another level to everyone else. And, 10 years old, winning his first karting championship. To think in 2 years we had gone from a kid that we thought had no future to now, well, now this kid's winning a championship, and he finished third at the Canadian National Championships. It's been crazy, from that point, at 8 years old to the time he was 12, he won 3 karting championships, and because of the confidence he gained from racing, all his friends came from the racing world because they accepted Austin based on his abilities on the track, and got to know him because of his abilities on the track. They didn't care that he couldn't tie his shoes. They didn't care that he couldn't do up a zipper. They didn't care if he was a little different. They had the same interests. They loved racing, and that's how he was accepted. And it's the greatest thing racing has done for Austin is given him a support system of friends all around the world that he's raced with. But I think the biggest thing is taught him coping mechanisms, because some people on the spectrum, especially Austin, they like to know certainty. They like to know exactly when something was going to happen, what time's it going to happen, who is it going to happen with, where is it going to happen. Well, in racing, when the race is going to start, how long it's going to be, but you don't know what's going to happen between flag to flag. Yep. And those coping skills that Austin's had to deal with, and in the beginning it was really rough. If something bad happened, just say Dad made a mistake on the go-kart, which I did many times, and caused us to be sitting on the grid while everybody was out on the track. That was a big problem, and it would take hours, if not a day, for Austin to get over it. And now he could be in the biggest race of his life, leading with 1 lap to go, and he's going to win the championship of the world. And 15 minutes after the car stops, he'd be okay again.
Amazing. This is a life skill I talk to a lot of parents about, not only for autistics, but also in the general population. Anyone dealing with unpredictability is a life skill. But especially for some individuals on the spectrum, I've had the same experience that it can be tricky. When life is not predictable, what do I do? How do I deal with this? So for Austin to be able to learn that skill, that's not just about racing. That's a life skill.
Yeah.
So how did that come? So you said at the beginning, there were moments that were, okay, something happened. Dad didn't fix the car. I can't even believe you know how to do that, or you learned that. That's amazing. But okay, that happened. Life was pretty crappy for the next couple days, right? Yeah. Understandably so, but it's a life skill to learn. Okay, sometimes things happen that really suck. How did he get to the point where something happens on the track and, okay, that really sucks, but I'm going to pick up and be okay and move on?
I don't think there was any eureka moment. It was more just repetition. when you're racing 18, 20 times a year and you're on track from Friday to Sunday, you spend a lot of time together, you spend a lot of time on the track. There are a lot of things that happen throughout a weekend.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was just us not giving up at the first hurdle and thinking, well, okay, this is too hard. Austin loved racing so much that he didn't want to give up either. So he may be having a meltdown over something, but deep down inside, if I got the cart ready, he'd be ready to go to the next session. He wouldn't be totally happy. He would still have underlying issues that were still there.
Yeah.
But for that moment when the green flag dropped and he had his helmet on, that's what he would focus on. And over time, the difficulty of whatever happened is just narrowed. Like the time that he would have to deal with it has just progressively gotten smaller over his racing career. And I think as a parent, I've watched lots of kids come off the track, whether they've won a race or had the worst race of their life. The thing I admire most about Austin is when he's on the track and comes off the track, you can't tell whether he won the race or finished 21st. And that shows me that he really has a passion for what he's doing, because he's out there doing what people his whole life said he would never be able to do. And it's his favorite thing in the world to do. So he's really, his goal is to win a race, but that's not what defines him. And when we started racing for Austin, we didn't anticipate a house full of trophies. That wasn't the reason we were doing it. We were doing it because we wanted to find Austin some acceptance in life, something he enjoyed to do. The whole karting championships and now racing cars all over the world is, we never thought that was even a possibility. It's just we've been along for the ride ever since.
It's amazing. This is something every parent, every person should hear. This is like autism notwithstanding. I think it transcends autism. It's this idea that if you have a seed plant, we all do. I think we all have a seed planted inside of us of what our purpose is, and you honor that, right? That's it. That's the golden ticket right there. Whatever happens, win, lose, that's all just icing on the cake. But that Austin is able to live his life purpose, and that's really what I think happiness, or what I like to think of as fulfillment, really is, and he's living a fulfilling life. And by virtue of that, amazing things are happening. Community is being built. He's got his tribe. That's incredible. You have a tribe too, and good on you, and good on Austin's mom too for, cultivating that. And also that it's not this perfect journey, right? That there were moments where you just keep going. And it's remarkable that you guys got to from where you started to now, which is racing around the world.
I use the analogy all the time, like with Austin, it takes twice as long to do half as much. And I look at it like a long hallway, and you're just trying to push a penny down the hallway, and you can only push it a little tiny bit, and sometimes, whatever reason, it comes back again. But if you keep pushing that penny, at some point you're a lot further down the hallway than you ever thought you'd be. And there's been a lot of times this year, not to get too far ahead, where I've just kind of looked around and like, how the hell did we get here? How are we standing, how is Austin racing on a Formula One track in, Circuit of the Americas in Texas, standing on the podium, spraying champagne with it boggles my mind. And when we're at a racetrack and we see family after family come to the track, not to watch the racing, but to meet Austin and get their picture taken with them, and their son or daughter with autism looks at Austin like a rock star, and Austin puts them in the race car and it gives them a Racing with Autism shirt. And for him to make that much time for those kids and to be that sort of inspiration to them, whether it's racing that they want to do or anything else in life. Because Austin has been brave enough to share his story with everybody, with some pushing from mom and dad, of course, but for him to continue not to listen to people that say, there are boundaries, that you'll never be able to do this or that. He's shown that if you find something you love to do and you work very hard at it, you can be successful. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. You can still do things. And when kids see what Austin has to face every day and yet is still being successful, still doing what he loves to do, it gives them hope. It gives them a willingness to try things they wouldn't normally try. And there's not a week or day that goes by that I don't get a message from somewhere in the world that basically says, oh my God, my son or daughter did this because Austin is their role model and they saw Austin do this or they saw Austin do that and now they want to try something. The on-track things are great, but if and when we ever get to the end of this road, seeing the difference Austin has made in other families all around the world is way, way better than any on-track accomplishment in my mind. He's done some amazing things on track, but the amount of change that he has brought to the world just from doing what he loves to do is pretty staggering, and that makes me the proudest, I think, as a parent.
It's remarkable. I don't know what else you can ask for after that. I mean, that's just not only the racing, not only being fulfilled personally, but paying that forward to so many people and being such an inspiration is incredible. So we met, gosh, I don't know. I feel like it was years ago. I don't remember when, but it was much earlier in Austin's career. And I guess things were, like, the momentum was there, things were moving.
I think the biggest thing that changed everything for us was I remember the moment we were sitting in our living room at home. So I had Austin's karting mechanic at the time, Curtis, in our living room, and we were trying to plan Austin's race schedule for the 2014 season. So we had a set budget of how much money we had, and we could only pick, so many races that we wanted to do, and we were trying to work out our schedules. And we're about halfway through the process, and Austin came into the room and kind of interrupted proceedings and said, "Dad, I want to race somewhere different this year." Now, when a kid on the spectrum tells you he wants to do something different, try something different, eat something different, wear something different, go somewhere different, it's a huge step. And I kind of looked at Austin and said, "Where do you want to race this different, man?" And Austin said, "Dad, I want to race in the Western Canadian Karting Championships." Well, dude, I know geography isn't your strong point, but we live in Eastern Canada. Where are the Western Canadian Karting Championships this year? And he said, "Oh, they're in Regina, Saskatchewan," like it's across the street. So I looked on the laptop and Google Maps and typed in the address of the track, and the drive time was like 28 hours. I'm like, "Austin, there's no way we can do this. It's going to cost too much money, take too much time. It's a great idea. I appreciate this, but I don't think it's possible." And to my surprise, Austin was really prepared for how the conversation was going to go. He said, "So, Dad, what if we skipped a couple of the races we did in Quebec and we just did this one race instead?" Well, that's a fair compromise, son, because the money we saved from 2 trips to Quebec, we could do this one trip instead. So, about a month and a half later, we're driving 28 hours and 36 minutes to Regina, Saskatchewan. And there are two things that really stand out to me. First was on the drive to Regina. So Austin at that time still had to eat by the clock. And what I say by that is if it's 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to eat at 12. So I remember being somewhere in the middle of Wisconsin, and all I could see is like cornfields as far as you could see. And I'm looking at the clock on the navigation, and it's 12:02. And I can feel Austin burning a hole in me from the back seat with his eyes. And he made it till about 12:05, and I heard, "Dad, where are we eating?" And I'm like, "Son, anywhere you want." And so they just started, that was the start of a meltdown right there. Like, so we're not going to eat today. I'm going to starve to death. And just how quickly it went downhill. And I remember going to the nav and, food, restaurants, and the closest thing was like 45 minutes behind us. I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. And I remember Curtis sitting beside me. It was like one of the first times we traveled together, and he's like going out of his mind, like, how are you dealing with this? And it was really, really bad. And it was about 5 minutes to 1. Then all of a sudden I saw like a sign, like a Ruby Tuesdays appear. I was like, oh my God, I've never been so happy to see a restaurant.
Miracle. Yeah.
So we actually get to the track, and the other thing Austin struggled with at that time in his life was going to new places. Going anywhere he hadn't been before, meeting new people, caused so much anxiety. It was almost inconsolable. You couldn't help him feel better. It was just, anxiety was off at a new level every time we went somewhere new. And when we were racing, if we went to a new track that Austin hadn't been to before, especially out of town, if we just got there like everybody else and set up and on the track, no, he wouldn't be able to operate. The anxiety would be too much for him. So we'd always have to go like 2 or 3 days early, even before the event started, just to get used to the hotel, get used to the surroundings, have a look around. So when we arrived in Regina, we were like three days early before we were supposed to be at the track, and we pull in the parking lot, and I remember the guy saying, "You here for the event this weekend?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're really early."
Yep.
Yep, we know. Just put us at the back, we'll be fine. So we set up all at the back, and we did nothing for 3 days other than let Austin get acclimatized, and nobody knew who we were at that point. We didn't have a massive social media following. Nobody knew Austin other than the small group in Ontario. I remember standing on the fence during one of the practice sessions and with Austin's mechanic Curtis, and all I could hear is the other mechanic saying, like, "Who the hell is that? Who the hell is that?" every time Austin went by. It's because he was half a second faster than everybody else. Now half a second to you or me doesn't sound like a lot of time. But in the go-karting world, especially in the class Austin was racing in, which was the most competitive class in North America, junior road tags, half a second is an eternity. Like from first place at a national event like this, from first place to like 15th place would be a difference of 0.2 of a second. For him to be half a second,
It's huge.
yeah, it's massive. And I'm listening to this conversation. Who the hell is that? And then there was another mechanic that was working for a Western kid from Ontario. He goes, "That's the autistic kid from Ontario." And all I heard was the other guy say, "Well, I heard about that kid. I didn't know he was any good." And
Wow.
what an amazing event that turned out to be. Austin was amazing on the track. And I remember as we were packing up to go home, we get back to our trailer after the Sunday race, and the swarms of people all over the trailer. Like I'd never seen these people all weekend. And they all wanted to tell me how amazing it was that Austin can do what he does with what he has. And they wanted to learn more about his story. And I sold every Racing with Autism t-shirt that we had. One guy even bought the one I was wearing because I didn't have his size. And we packed up later that night and started the journey home. And Austin hopped in the back seat and stretched out, put his headphones on, and let me know when it's dinner time. And we're about half an hour into the drive, and Curtis looked at me and he said, "It's pretty amazing what happened this weekend. Like, we created all this awareness for autism and didn't mean to."
Yep.
And Curtis said, "We should do more of this. We should travel. We should take Austin on a tour and take him all these places that he's never raced before and share his story with a whole new audience." And I'm like, "It's a great idea, but who the hell's going to pay for that? And how, the amount of time off work, how's
this going to work?"
It's not possible."
Yeah.
But luckily for us, we had 27 more hours to figure it out. So by the time we got home, we had this whole idea of doing this tour. So we started fundraising, and we did like a 24-hour go-kart challenge where we drove a go-kart around Goodwood Cartways for 24 hours, just a team. And we raised so much money, it was shocking. And, we were able, with some sponsorship, to fund the tour. And on March 21st, 2015, we left our house in Uxbridge, and we ended up being on the road for 87 days straight. And we went coast to coast in the US, and we went from Vancouver to Winnipeg to Ontario, and then 2 weeks after we came home, we did the East Coast as well. We visited schools. Austin raced, so well. We went from track to track, and in between visiting tracks, we visited schools along the way. And it was amazing. The first 4 weeks were an absolute living hell, because you can imagine a kid that didn't like going new places, meeting new people. As soon as we left Florida, where he'd been to before and raced at before, everything was different. Every road we were going down, every gas station, every restaurant, every racetrack, it was just a nightmare. And I remember pulling the truck over on the highway many times, just saying, like, "Dude, we can't keep going like this, man. Like, I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the truck's losing their mind. You have to get things under control." And, as a dad, thinking, "Oh, this is such a great idea," to realize how much pain it's actually causing Austin, the anxiety and the stress, and it was all inflicted in him because of this idea that I had. I'm like, "Dude, let's just stop. We'll cancel everything. Let's just go home." Mm-hmm. And every time I said that, Austin looked at me and said, "Dad, I want to keep going." But after the 4-week mark, we were just leaving, I think, San Antonio. Things started to change. Austin started to change. He started to realize the world wasn't such a scary place. When we pulled into a new place, he wanted to go exploring and see what it had to offer. He wanted to go on hikes. He wanted to try new foods. He wanted to do all these things that 4 weeks earlier I thought were impossible. And, we did the first school presentation in New Orleans. And I remember Austin being so uncomfortable to go into the school presentation that he stayed out the gymnasium for about 3/4 of it, and then only came in when he heard the applause at the end. And if I fast forward to 8 weeks later, we're standing in a school called Bears Paw near Calgary, Alberta. Massive school, like 700 kids. And we're about to start the presentation, and Austin taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Dad, I want to speak today." I'm like, "What?"
Yes.
He's like,
Yeah.
"No, I want to speak.
This is incredible.
I want to write a speech, and I want to talk at the end." And he went off with my nephew and Jessica, the lady from Australia that was living with us. We're so blessed to have so many amazing people in Austin's life that have helped us get here. Jess is certainly one of those people. And we could probably do a whole podcast just on Jess and her story. But
Let's do it. But coming up next.
yeah, it was that presentation. The school was just electric. The whole vibe of the school, the way they were taking in the story was just awesome. And then when Austin got up to speak at the end, like for me to introduce him, you know, here's my son, and this is the first time he's ever spoken in front of an audience. This is the same kid that wouldn't even stand up in his class of, 6 kids who he's at school with every day to put up his hand to ask a question. And now he's standing in front of a school of 700 kids who he doesn't know and has written his own speech. Like, that is staggering. And to watch Austin to then, this speech was very short, mind you, but for him to even want to do that was staggering. It showed how much that journey, even though it was very difficult at the beginning, how it changed him. And it wasn't until the last 2 weeks of the tour that Austin's behavior started to really stink again. And I couldn't understand why. And we were at a racetrack in Gimli, Manitoba. And Austin was doing a terrible job on track for whatever reason. Just wasn't into it that day. And I had driven like through the night from Alberta, from a school in Saskatoon, I think, to Manitoba. Driven through the night to get there on time while everybody else slept. My patience was,
oh my gosh, exhausted.
short.
Yeah.
And Austin came off track, and I'll be the first to admit I lost my temper. Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we're coming all this way. What's going on? Like, your behavior the last week has been terrible. So I grabbed him out of the go-kart and I took him to the truck and I sat him on the bed of the truck and, please explain to me what you're doing. Why is all these roadblocks or hurdles that we thought we'd cleared, why are they all back? Why is your anxiety through the roof? Why is all this behavior come back? And he said to me, Dad, it's because the tour is ending. This is what I was meant to do. And just got off of the truck and walked back to his go-kart like he hadn't said anything profound. And I couldn't process what he had just said. Like, how is that possible? How is this kid that couldn't go into a Tim Hortons by himself now just wants to travel the world? And from the time we got back from that tour, we started planning for the next one. And if you go on our website, racingwithautism.com, there's a feature-length documentary that we filmed of that whole journey, that first tour. And if you're a parent of a child with autism, the first 28 minutes are going to be really hard to watch, because when we were editing this with the producer, every version they sent me, I'm like, no, that's not what happened. This is like all fluffy clouds and butterflies.
Yeah.
I said, I want a direct representation of what we went through that first 4 weeks, whether it's good or bad, whether it makes me look good or bad.
Yeah.
We really need to show how hard it was those first 4 weeks, and how hard it was for Austin to function, and how he was able to overcome those hurdles, and now look at him. This is the result. There are many times in that first 28 minutes where I am not Father of the Year, and I'll be the first to admit it. But there were so many contributing factors to the way I was acting. Austin's behavior was terrible. the schedule that we had booked was, you imagine driving coast to coast for 87 days
No.
and have to be at a certain school at a certain time. But Austin's behaviors caused you to stop on the side of the road for a couple hours to get the meltdown over with and then get back in the truck. And now I got to drive unhappily into like the wee hours of the morning. It just compounds. And, the low point obviously was someplace in Texas where Austin's in the back seat. I think it was Jess's birthday. We were near the Grand Canyon. We were supposed to be at the Grand Canyon, and we were still many hours away because Jess had always wanted to go to the Grand Canyon for her birthday. And Austin was sitting in the back seat saying he wants to kill himself. And then you fast forward to the end of the tour just to see that's the kind of turnaround. And when you watch the film, even though it's only a 12-week period, Austin physically looks different from the beginning to the end. The confidence he shows, the way he carries himself, his attitude in life. It is not even the same kid. And I catch myself watching it all the time, and I have to remind myself nowadays that, especially when things aren't going well, that I treat Austin, or I'm trying to word it properly. I forget Austin has autism. Like, it hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
He's just got better hiding it from me or coping with it in the world. And I really have to remind myself now, like all these great things that Austin's doing is still there.
It's still there. And it's tough sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's just gotten better at fitting into the world rather than the world fitting into him.
Sure.
And
good on you, good on Austin for having the courage to share what you've shared, and like of course the incredible successes, and I'd love to hear more about that, but there's a path to getting there, and that it's real, and it can be really tough sometimes, and that takes a lot of courage to share that with people. And I think that's really important for parents to hear, for therapists or providers, and the greater community to hear that yes, there's beautiful successes and celebrations, and we should all get behind that. There's a path to getting there, and it's real. And that takes a lot of courage to share that in the community. Absolutely. What are some of your most memorable moments in terms of races, or moments along the way, successes, celebrations that you talked about Austin's speech, which is incredibly touching. After that,
that tour, since that tour, we've toured Australia, the United Kingdom, Bermuda twice, and we did 2 Canadian tours in 2018 and 2019. Obviously, the pandemic has put a halt to us to doing any of that, but the highlights of racing-wise, in 2017 when Austin got the opportunity to race a car for the first time. That was such an amazing moment. I think we met shortly before the first race. It was just announced, and Austin was making news all over North America. A kid with autism was racing a car. I remember we went to Quebec to do the preseason test with Nissan, and the media was there, TV people, newspaper people. It was so cold, and I remember Austin handling it like it was just a day at the office. And Method and his wife Marie were the ones that made this all possible. They funded that whole first season. My wife and I, at the end of 2016, we were done financially. We had no more room on any credit card. It was going to be the end of the road for Austin racing wise, and then I got a knock at the door, and it was Method who I'd met for the first time. And next thing we know, we were on tour in the United Kingdom, and Method and Marie FaceTimed us and basically told us that they were going to fund a whole season in the Nissan Micro Cup for Austin because they had an autistic son, and Austin gives them
Wow.
hope. And I would like to say that that season would have went better. Austin was very, I guess, apprehensive about racing a car. He loved to do it, and he progressively got better and better as the season went on, but he really wasn't showing his true talent, I guess, for lack of a better word. And digging down into why that happened years after, basically because he knew that somebody was doing something really nice for him, so he didn't want to damage the car or ever put it in a place where it could be damaged and cost them more money, or realize that if something bad happened in the car, that would be the end of it for him. Because of everything that happened that first year, we were able to gain some sponsorship. We were able to buy the car from Method and Marie. We were able to, fund it ourselves. We sold puzzle pieces where people could get their name on the car. We had so much support that year, and Austin went from like mid-pack 15th guy to top 10 guy. And then the third year in 2019 is where Austin had a lot of swagger. He, a lot of confidence. He was comfortable with the people he was racing around, and he was top 5 most of the time. And then, Calabogie in Ottawa was life changing. He reached the podium. He finished third. First, second, and third were like nose to tail at the line. Austin was third. Everybody else was like 8-10 seconds behind. And I remember Austin coming off track and realizing that he finished third, and all the Nissan people were like in tears because like this is history we just witnessed. Like no kid in Canada with autism, if not North America, podiumed in a nationally sanctioned race. Like, and
Huge.
the Nissan Micro Cup was not for the faint of heart either. You got like 30 cars on the grid, all exactly the same. So the only difference really is the driver. For him to finish third in that field was pretty spectacular, and it made news everywhere. And then that caused my phone to ring from a race outfit in California that gave him an opportunity to drive a Celine, this new race car that was 450 horsepower. So he's going from driving a 109 horsepower Econo box to a 450 horsepower supercar. And I'm sure the reason Celine did it was because Austin was in the news. It would bring a lot of attention to the series, him racing there. It's a great story. It was something they could promote. And, we got off the plane in Portland. And you had a lot to do with us even getting on the plane, if I remember correctly, because if you remember, I was trying to get a hold of you when we got the news,
Yes, I
because we were
remember,
having
yeah.
some licensing issues, and you put us in touch with Dr. Wendy Roberts,
Yep.
who I had to stalk in her office waiting for her to pass by before she would see us, and she gave Austin his race license, but we went to Portland that week after, and I guess the publicity stunt, everybody's kind of in shock when Austin and his co-driver win the first race.
Yeah, it's not a publicity stunt. This is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, Mr. Celine said, that kid's pretty amazing. He was a racer in his own right, and there's no way we had the money to run this series as well as the Micro Cup. And, Mr. Celine said, I want Austin to keep racing. So they covered our costs. All we had to do was get the flight there and back, and they covered everything for us. And Austin won many more races, on the podium every race, and we ended up in Las Vegas at the season end, and Austin was in the championship lead, and He had a mechanical failure in the last race that cost him the championship. And, if you look at that, Austin getting out of the car, the award for, winning the championship was you were going to be the Saleen factory driver in their GT4 entrance, which is like a massive series in the States. And because Austin lost that opportunity, he was pretty heartbroken because that's always been Austin's dream to race in that type of car, that type of competition, and that was taken away from him. And it wasn't really his fault. When he got out of the car, it was not good, but that was for half an hour or so, and then life was better. And then we went to the Motorsports Awards in Las Vegas. I also had to wear a tuxedo, and then he went up to get a second place trophy, and then Mr. Saleen stole the show and said, gave the first place guy his trophy, but then all I wanted to do was talk about Austin, and said, he's going to race for us next year regardless. Here's a check for $25,000. This kid's going places, and I'm just a mess. Like in the audience, I had no idea what was happening, what was going on, and unfortunately for Austin, the pandemic started and the whole Saleen race program shut down. But the money that we received allowed us to buy Austin's race car. We raced a Radical the next year, like a full-blown race car in 2020, and we were really not sure. It was a massive step up to race a Radical from a Micra, but given what had happened to the Saleen, we certainly realized that Austin had the talent. And first race back at Calabogie again, we're hoping top 5. Austin ends up winning, and he won every race that weekend. And that whole season, out of 14 races, he won 10 times, finished second 3 times, and third once. And again, made history, becoming the first person with autism I know of to win a major car championship. And just to prove it wasn't a fluke, he did the exact same thing in 2021. And this year, in 2022, Austin's been racing in the US Series against much deeper competition, much bigger fields, and going into the final round in 3 weeks' time in Sonoma, California. Austin is leading the championship in class and also leading the overall championship. And that is pretty amazing considering the budget that we have compared to everybody else. Being the smallest trailer in the paddock, being the only single car team, being a dad and a couple of young mechanics that working for way less than they should just because they want to be there with Austin.
And make history.
It's pretty crazy.
That's just, Jason, I can't tell you how many times while we've been chatting I've gotten chills, just like over and over. It's just remarkable. It's really remarkable. Go Cali. That's what I say. Go Austin, go Jason, go team. It's just, it's incredibly remarkable. You mentioned that there's been this like following of individuals with autism who have been inspired by Austin. Tell me about some of those stories. What are those kids doing?
Where do I start? I guess in 2014, 2015, we really started to realize that Austin's story was gaining a lot of traction. It was resonating in schools. Well, the first school presentation we did, we thought maybe a quarter of the population would want to come and get a autograph of Austin's and a hero card, and I would say that was quite the opposite. Like almost over 90% of the kids were lined up at Austin's table for an autograph, and since that time it's only gotten bigger. And the racing world, there's kids all over the world that have started racing because of Austin. And I as a dad and as a parent and racing with autism, motorsports has given me a son I never would have had. I look at all the things I've done with Austin and the places we've been and places we've gone because of his ability behind the wheel has really changed my life as much as it's changed his. So, when we sell Racing with Autism merchandise, t-shirts, puzzle pieces, some of that helps Austin keep racing. The rest of it goes into an account, and every year somebody seems to present themselves at some point of the year where it's a family with an autistic child that loves to race that doesn't quite have the money they need to compete, or something bad has happened, they've had something stolen, or something bad has happened in the family and the child with autism is really having trouble getting over it. And we pick an individual every year and we try and give back. So the first such individual was a young man named Sandro Ballesteros in the United Kingdom. We met, actually, I'm sorry, the first individual that we picked was a young man named Jaden Alfage. Jaden and his father. It was a fluke chance of how we met. Austin was supposed to be racing in Quebec. He was still racing karts at the time. And we weren't able to go. We didn't have the money to go. So I guess as a secondary prize, we took Austin that weekend to the track just to practice and run some laps, just to get rid of some anxiety and some stress. And I'm standing there watching Austin on the track, and then all of a sudden I feel a tap on the shoulder. I turn around, and there's this man I've never seen before. And he puts his arms around me and hugs me and starts crying. And I won't say I'm a manly man, but I'm pretty uncomfortable. Like, who is this guy and why is this happening is the stuff I want to know. And it turns out that his young son, Jaden, is autistic, and he also has cerebral palsy. And Jaden started racing because of Austin. And for him to actually meet me for the first time, it was just a chance meeting. He was there practicing with Jaden. It was a huge moment for both of them. And it was that moment that we started to realize that, this is big. Like, the impact we're having on other people is significant. So Jaden was actually the first Racing with Autism sponsorship winner. Well, I shouldn't say winner, selection. Mm-hmm. So we furnished Jaden with a brand new helmet, and we had it painted by world famous painter Austin Poland in Indiana, who paints for IndyCar guys and NASCAR guys, like world famous drivers. But he's been Austin's helmet painter since he was 12 years old. Austin and myself have all become very close friends, and so he gives us a great, discount, and we get a helmet, and we help pay the kids' registration for the year, take some of the load off the parents, and it's a way that we can give back. But we've done a kid every year since 2014. There's two that really stand out, and they're both in the United Kingdom. Like, there's kids all over the world that we've been able to sponsor, but the first one was Sandro. Mm-hmm. We met his parents on tour, on the UK tour for the first time. We were speaking at Sandro's school, and Sandro got to sit with Austin during the presentation, and I made a point of talking about Sandro in the school because he was having the same trouble that Austin was in school. When you just see a kid with autism, it's a little different. It's really hard to fit in at school. But when you're a champion go-kart driver with autism, it really changes the way people look at you. Like, when we did the first school presentation at Austin School, like high school, like 1,200 kids there. And Austin went from the kid, that's a bit different stays in the exceptional class and gets picked on every day, to being a rock star after the presentation, where I'm seeing kids stand in the autograph line of the same kids that were bullying him the day before. It's the same kid.
Wow.
It's just you've learned something about him. And I like to think that we made a difference for Sandro in that school, and we spent the day with Sandro's parents. And Sandro has progressed through the karting ranks and now is racing a car in England. And they've partnered with us, and they've started like racing with Autism UK. So Sandro and his dad are doing what Austin and I do, going to schools and sharing their story. And then
Amazing.
we bring Jess back into the picture. Jess is in Australia. Jess came to live with us in 2014, 2015. She won a scholarship for being named Junior Educator of the Year for all of Australia. And she came to Canada to live with us because she had found Austin's story, and Austin brought her two loves together, autism and racing. She raced karts, and obviously she worked with kids with autism during the week. And since, I look at Jess as an inspiration because she started Racing with Autism Australia.
Wow.
And I've lost count of how many kids they have under that umbrella now. She's got to the point where she's doing fundraising. She's helping all these kids that are racing with autism and their families, cover the costs. And she's going to big events, and she's operating what they call a pit stop. So like big race weekends where there's hundreds of thousands of people, they have a place with Jess's Pit Stop and Racing with Autism where a kid on the spectrum can go and just kind of switch off a sensory area where it's just when life has become a bit overwhelming at the event, parents can take them just to leave them for a few minutes with a specialist, with somebody that knows what's actually going on and can help regain some composure or feel a little less anxious about the proceedings. It's staggering when I realize how like one trip to Regina, Saskatchewan has kind of changed everything.
One flyer.
Yes.
One flyer. I mean, we could talk, Jason, for hours. This is just remarkable. Like starting with the flyer, even starting before that, starting with the soccer that didn't work out, and then so on and so forth, and to impacting children with autism across the world, families, schools. It's remarkable what Austin's done, what you've done. It's just beautiful to share the tough times and how you came through that. And thank you for being here with me today and
Thank you for having
sharing it all. And I encourage people to go to racingwithautism.com. Is that right?
Yep.
Racingwithautism.com to learn more about Austin and your family and the journey of racing and to see what's to come in California. I wish you guys well, and thank you for spending the time with me here.
Thank you for having me.
There's only so much we could cover in the short amount of time we had today. If you found value in what we talked about, go to breakthroughautism.ca, join our newsletter, and also follow me on my socials.